So let's say that I'm experiencing some troubles with my code, but it doesn't crash. It just gives me some strange outputs, or perhaps I'm expecting to see some kind of display and I'm not seeing it. And now I've written a lot of code. And I really begin to lose track where exactly things are happening. So I just need to be able to quickly see what is this program doing at runtime. How can this be done? There is this debug menu, which allows us to start without debugging, which I did pretty much all the time, but also pressing F5 or simply saying start debugging like this allows us to execute our code step by step. It's possible because the debugging environment, what it does, it starts our program and stops it immediately. Essentially, it sets the CPU flag, which is typically called a trap flag or debug flag, and says, let's execute this program, but one instruction at a time. And every time one instruction is executed, the debugger is notified, so the program stops and the debugger has a chance to continue execution of this program or allow the programmer a chance to examine the memory of the program, all the variables, and the entire runtime environment. Right? So this is a very helpful technique, and we essentially need to learn how to debug our own code and or someone else's code. So normally debugging starts with a breakpoint. The way to introduce a breakpoint into our program is, for instance, let's say that I decided that on this line where I create my numbers, which I try to investigate, why is it empty somehow, right? I can right click and choose to breakpoint menu and insert breakpoint. Or you can simply, you should be able to click on the margin right here, and it will insert a breakpoint. So the breakpoint indicates to the debugger that this is the place where we want to stop and examine the program. All right, so with this breakpoint now, I would like to make sure I build the latest version. Right, so there were some changes, so I rebuilt my program, and now I simply go to press F5 or debug, start debugging. Okay, so this time the program starts, and of course I'm expecting that my program starts in the main function, right? And notice that the program, my debugging environment was loading, and now you see that on top of this breakpoint, I have a little arrow indicator which tells me that the debug session has started. My program is now in memory. Actually, this is the window. You will not be able to see it in the recording, but it's a separate window, which is console window for this application. And this arrow indicates that this is the next line to execute. So the debugging breakpoint really allows you to preview the next line that will be executed inside of our program. We say that this is a source code level debugger, and it allows us to debug program line by line in a step-by-step manner. From here, I can simply say debug, continue, right? So this is like actually continue would be pressing F5 again. Or I can step over, right? So I can say, I can press F10 or step over, and I can step and step. And right now, for instance, I just step over this line, and if you look at my console window, this got already printed. And now I'm still debugging it, right? So now I am seeing the execution of this program step by step. So now it says while this input, right? So the next line is to generate some input. So of course I can try to step over this. Right? So this arrow indicates that this is the next line, which is right about to happen, and part of this line is input. So again, if I press let me just close some of these diagnostic tool windows, right? If I press F10 to step over the statement, F10, now the focus is now in my console window, and I need to type some input. So for instance, I press Control Z. Remember, Control Z would generate empty input. So if I press Control Z, which closes the input stream, this input attempt fails, and we simply get out of our loop because this entire condition becomes false. So I can observe this, and now I say, okay, my next line is to display the elements. And so this time, instead of stepping over it, I decide to use F11 or step into, right? So this little toolbar, the debugging toolbar, allows us to step into. Step into means that I don't want to skip execution of this function, like go to the next line. Instead, I would like to step into it. Right? So I press F11, and now I'm about, you see how it shows me that we're about to start executing this function. So now I guess I will press F10, right? And now I am running inside this function. So you see, now I was in main function, now I went as far as display function. And here's my vector, by the way. I can examine it in the additional debug windows, and I can see that its size is 0, even in debugging environment. And I can press another F10, which takes me right to my throw runtime error statement, right? So let's see how this behaves if I construct our runtime error and throw it. So I'll just simply say F10. So F10, stepping over a throw statement, and look where I ended up. I ended up right back in my main function, and now this is catch block, which was activated, right? And so what we thrown as an object containing our information now is here, and we have our what function built into runtime error. This is just a very simple part of implementation of this object, right? And I'm beginning to step over F10 here, and if you look at my output, stuff get print, everything is getting printed as expected, right? And eventually we print program failed, and the whole debugging session ends. Normally when I realize something that I was trying to find out, I typically just go to debug and say stop debugging, right? Essentially, I have just seen what has happened, and I'm satisfied. I realize what has happened, and in other words, it allows me to see exactly what is happening during runtime execution. So instead of just letting program run, we can step through individual lines. Of course, you have to be careful with what you use, step over or step into, which was in my case F10 and F11 choices, because if you don't make the right choice, you'd be like, you'll be seeing places that you were not expecting to see. For example, let me run this again very quickly. So I press F5 to restart my debugging session. My debugging environment starts. And I press again F10, F10, and now F11. And I'm just, okay, so I am entering Control Z, right? And now I'm about to call my display elements function. So I press F11 to be able to step into it, and I do. And then I press F11 again, and oh, I was expecting maybe to step into a vector constructor, but it did not happen. All right, so forget about this demonstration. It didn't work. I'm going to stop and try it again with another debug session. So I'm just pressing stop debugging and stopping it right now.